That gloomy feeling, it seems to come out of nowhere, it takes over, putting you in a subdued state. To say the least, it's not very pleasant, nor is it something that you can easily snap out of. Mental health clinicians call it depression. I'm Dr. Wes Beavis, and call it what you will, I like to call it solvable. I'll even go further and say, while there are many things that are not good about depression, it doesn't mean that depression is all bad. In fact, in some cases, depression can be quite helpful. Maybe you've been depressed in the past, maybe you've got some depressed symptoms at the moment. What I want you to know is you don't need to see depression as the enemy. Depression could be a key ingredient in making our lives better. I remember when I was a teenager, I got my license, bought my car, and smashed it, all within about a month. This is how it happened. My mother and a friend wanted to go into the city to attend the opening night of a show. And being newly ordained by the Department of Motor Vehicles as a credible driver, I insisted that I drive them in. All was going so well, I was feeling very adultish, had my hands at the 10 to 2 position. I couldn't be happier. Then I noticed down the road a bit, there was a car stopped in my lane wanting to take a turn into a side street. So it seemed a very simple set of options. Option A, come to a stop behind the driver, wait for him to find a break in the oncoming traffic and take his turn into the side street. Option B was me to simply change lanes and go around him and proceed on my way. I had plenty of roadway in order to make that decision, so I kind of jumped back and forth in my mind. Should it be option A? Should it be option B? They seemed to be very simple options, and for the life of me, I couldn't make a decision. So in the very last moments, I decided, right, I'm going to change lanes and go around him. But as I did, I realized that I had not left enough room to make that maneuver safely, and so in the very last second, I slammed on my brakes to come to a stop behind him, but my car kept going. I plowed straight into the back of the driver in front of me. To say I was humiliated was an understatement. I was embarrassed, I was mortified, and I lost my emotional composure. I started to cry. I couldn't believe it. I had my mum in my car. It's one thing to have your first accident by yourself, but to have your mother in the passenger seat, that just amplified the humiliation. So it took 6 weeks for my car to be repaired. And during that time, it was mostly a miserable experience. I'd lost my freedom, I'd lost my independence, I'd lost my car, I'd lost my pride, I'd lost a lot of things. So understandably, I was depressed. And I remember one day my dad picking me up from work, and I was starting to complain about, the accident, and my dad patiently listened to me, give accounts for, why the driver should have moved quicker, and I was blaming everybody but myself. And eventually my dad very patiently turned to me, but very succinctly said, "Son, your driving is what caused the accident. It was your fault. And the sooner you come to grips with that, the sooner you're going to get over it." While it was hard for me to hear my dad say those words, he was absolutely right. It was understandable that I experienced depression because of the experience, the trauma of losing my car, and embarrassingly so, and now having to take the bus and bum lifts off everybody, which was an absolute reminder to me of my mistake. I had become stuck in my depression because I had yet to take ownership for the part that I played in causing the accident. And as soon as I owned up, the depression started to lift. It's as if the depression was hanging around saying, hey, there's something that you're holding on to here which is causing you to stay stuck in this place. And depression was like a messenger saying, listen, you cannot blame other people. But before I go any further, I feel the need to establish a caveat here. Clinical depression is in a category all on its own. People who suffer from clinical depression are debilitated to the point where it's really, really difficult to function. And when I say suffer, I really mean it. When people come in to my private practice and they are suffering clinical depression, they experience a level of anguish in their life that nobody should have to go through. But fortunately, there are effective treatments for people in this category. Those treatments include counseling from a trained professional. It can also include medications prescribed by a doctor, and sometimes treatment involves hospitalization to help a person who is suffering stabilize so that they can return to normal activities of daily living. Depression should be taken seriously, but not every depression is serious enough for clinical and medical intervention. Let me explain using a bell curve. Us psychologists, we love bell curves. But this will help you to conceptualize how people fit into different categories of experiencing these gloomy, depressive feelings. So here is our bell curve. For the sake of simplicity, there are 3 zones. Over here in this section of the bell curve are people who never get depressed, or maybe they're not willing to admit they ever struggle with feeling down. Let's call them the lucky ones. Then there are people over here on the opposite side who really suffer with debilitating bouts of depression. People in this category are diagnosed as suffering from clinical depression. Then there is the big section of the bell curve, right here in the middle, somewhere between never having depression on one side and on the other side having clinical depression. This right here in the middle is where most of us live. We do experience occasional bouts of depressed mood, but it's not debilitating to the point where we cannot function. It's to this group of people here that I want to speak. Let depression have its say. It may be trying to convey to you something that needs to change in your life. So at least listen. You don't have to agree with what it says, and certainly don't give depression the microphone to start calling the shots on how you should live. But just take a moment to think about what depression may be saying to you. And then there is a time to manage those gloomy feelings and to reduce them. So here are some key ways to manage those gloomy feelings. Number 1. Normalize it. Depression is a part of the human experience. Life is not rainbows and unicorns all the time, and certainly nobody's life is a chain of unbroken successes, except the fact that the occasional depressed mood is a part of the human journey. Now, culture would have us think that we should never be depressed, that if we wake up with low mood, then something's seriously wrong and we need to get it fixed right away. But occasionally in life, stuff happens, and the appropriate response is for us to be feeling down. We need to process what happens. So number 1, normalize it. The occasional depressive symptoms are part of the human experience. It doesn't necessarily mean that something is wrong. Number 2, ask good questions. Well, that implies, is it possible to ask bad questions? And my answer to that is, oh, absolutely. When you're down, believe me, you can specialize in asking all the wrong questions. Questions like, why does this always happen to me? And when you ask questions like that, all you're doing is digging your emotional hole even deeper and making it that much harder for you to get out of. So what is an example of a good question? Here are some good questions. What can I learn from going through this? What is depression trying to tell me? What in my life is not working that needs to be addressed? Those are premium questions, and in reflecting on the answers to those questions, you will find yourself slowly but surely digging yourself out of that emotional hole. Low moods can be an effective information delivery system. Because sometimes the way that we are doing life is no longer working. And so depression shows up as a messenger telling us that we need to change some of our behaviors or we need to modify some of our expectations. Oftentimes the message that depression is trying to convey is a simple one. That we're spending too much time indoors, that we're not getting enough sunshine. Sometimes our low moods are saying, hey, you need to get out into the things that you love, nature, go for a walk, go for a bike ride, go for a swim, get together with positive people. Sometimes a depressed mood is simply saying, hey, it's about time you went on a vacation. Number 3, start a job well done momentum. Depression can sometimes get us all wrapped up in our own head. And when we're in our heads, we get stuck in our heads and we become very sedentary. The antidote to that is to think up a short list of 3 simple, achievable jobs that yield a satisfying result. And do them one right after the other. Say it's make your bed, feed the dog, and take out the trash. The simpler, the better. Because the goal here is not to conquer the world, but simply create a cascading momentum of constructive activity. Because it's the constructive activity that rescues us from being caught up in our own heads. And not only that, when we achieve something, no matter how small, our brain recognizes the achievement and rewards us with a little bit of feel-good chemical that doesn't hurt in creating a momentum for us to go on and tackle even greater jobs that we couldn't do when we were stuck inside our own thinking processes. So number 3, start a job well done momentum. Say to yourself, hey you, good job. Number 4, give yourself some time to emerge from the symptoms. And it could take several days before you start to feel your normal self again. When I catch a cold, I generally tell myself, well, this is going to take a week or so before I start to feel healthy again. And I give myself the time to work through the symptoms. I don't grab a Kleenex box and say, right, Kleenex box, you and I have got to get my body through all the symptoms by this afternoon because I don't have time for this cold. No, I give myself grace to work through the symptoms and gradually get myself back to feeling healthy and whole again. So it's going to take time for the symptoms to dissipate. But if you find that the symptoms are lingering on for a couple of weeks or so, then number 5 is going to help you. And number 5 is talk it through with a counselor. Make an appointment to see somebody who is skilled and trained at helping people navigate their way out of the shadows back into the emotional sunshine. Now you may ask, well, can't I talk to a friend? And I say, absolutely. If you've got a friend who has the time and patience to allow you to unpack all that's going on in your world, then yes, for the price of a cup of coffee, you may get real good therapy. But on the other hand, friends may not be as helpful as we hope they would be. They might be well-intentioned, well-meaning, but they might end up giving you advice when you don't really need advice. They might end up trying to buck you up, chin up, cheer up, suck it up, buttercup. Your life is tough and, quit being so sensitive. And that's not what we need to hear in that moment. So my general advice to people is let your friends be your friends. Don't turn them into your therapists because it's too easy to burn your friends out when you do. Instead, go to somebody trained, somebody who can effectively help you navigate your way back into the emotional sunshine. And not only that, but give you tools that you can use in the future if you find yourself in a similar predicament. So there you have it. 5 key ways to manage depressive symptoms if you find yourself experiencing them. Now, is this an exhaustive list? Absolutely not. There are dozens, actually there are hundreds of things that you can do to help you come out from the shadows back into the sunshine. But this is a start. Call it a beginner list, call it a Kickstarter list. These things will help you. So let's do a quick recap. Number 1, normalize it. Occasional depression is a normal part of the human journey. Don't let anybody convince you that something is wrong with you. It is normal to occasionally experience a depressed mood. Number 2, ask good questions, not the bonehead questions that just dig your emotional hole deeper. Number 3, start a job well done momentum. It will get you out of your head and kickstart you into greater levels of productivity and achievement. Number 4, give yourself some time. Number 5, talk it through with somebody. I hope this video has been really helpful to you in some meaningful way. And if it has, then join me. Hit subscribe. And while you're at it, hit the notifications button. So let's go on this journey together of making life better for everyone.